Hey, looks like we've got everybody almost here. Apart from these people right here, will be coming out during the day. So we're going to start now. When I was a kid, my mum used to say fingers on lips. And that meant everybody kept quiet, so she could talk. Or was it I kept quiet? Anyway, good morning and welcome. Good morning. Hey. Today is, as you know, our conference, Beyond Accounting, Not Just the Numbers. And what we're going to do, we've got a number of things lined up. Let's see if I can work quickly. We have an agenda, which I cunningly didn't give any of you, so you don't know what's happening today. But what we're going to do is I'm going to play a couple of videos shortly from two of our CEOs who have done an introductory message for us. And before that, we're going to do some housekeeping. So, first thing to remember is that there are times up there when things are definitely going to start or not. So, it's very flexible. So, we're starting a little late, so we'll push everything forward. We've got plenty of time over lunch to contract, etc. If some of our speakers speak a little bit longer, that's usually not a problem. If they speak a little shorter, that could be, but we'll encourage you to ask questions. So, what's going to happen today is we're going to do two sessions this morning on leadership and AI and third-party risk. We're then going to break for lunch. Lunch is going to be interesting because we're going to break into tables. And what we're going to do is you're going to talk in your tables about a topic that the moderator of the table will say to you. It could be sustainability, attractiveness of the profession, whatever. That moderator is going to then take notes, and when we come back in here, they're going to feed back the question and what they heard, and we're going to record it all. All the recordings are going to end up on our website, the CAW website, and segments are going to be out there on LinkedIn that we can share. So it'll all be very, I guess, make you all very important. We've got two sessions this afternoon on resilience, revisited, and then close out the day with enterprise risk management with Dan. This conference formally closes around 5:20. However, we then have an evening event that starts at 5:30 where we're going to have sheriffs from Homeland Security talking about fraud and AI, followed by a 2-hour open bar and food out on the terrace. So everything's together. The restrooms are out the door at the back on the right. Lunch and coffee and tea are out on your left. And this evening will be on the veranda outside. Any questions? Good. So what I'm going to do now is play our videos. Hang on. So the first video is from Bruce Cartwright, who is CEO of ICAS.
Here at ICAS, we work hard to support our members who are living and working everywhere, from Alberta to Auckland. We're also particularly aware of and grateful for the support and connection our many colleagues in the States gain from Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA. And the Beyond Accounting Conference is yet another example of that important work. The conference is back for another year to demonstrate that our profession is, as the title suggests, not just the numbers. Amongst other topics, you'll hear about what it means to be a leader, discover the latest AI-related insights, and consider the importance of personal resilience. You'll also hear from ICAS member Daniel Shafir, who'll lead a session on enterprise risk management. All of these are, of course, universal issues, key to chartered accountants in the US and indeed to the profession worldwide. That's why events like Beyond Accounting are of such significance and why we can all learn from the discussions that take place on the day. There's certainly a huge amount of value packed into the conference schedule, and I do hope everyone in attendance from ICAS and all the other CAW member bodies has an insightful and enjoyable time.
All right, now on to the next one. There we go. And so let's go to Barry Dempsey. Okay, here comes Barry.
Hello from Ireland. I'm Barry Dempsey, the Chief Executive of Chartered Accountants Ireland, and I'm also the Chartered Accountants Worldwide Institute's representative on the board of Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA. So welcome to the annual conference, Beyond Accounting, Not Just the Numbers. Not Just the Numbers as a theme is a theme that within Chartered Accountants Worldwide, we've been really prioritizing in recent months. It came out of research where we were researching the attractiveness of the profession. We were looking at the myths and perceptions about a career in accountancy. One of those primary myths is that it's just about the numbers. And so we're really using this and amplifying it to help people understand that accountancy and a career in accountancy is about advisory, consultancy, strategy, data, sustainability, and all these really fascinating and essential aspects of business and how the economy works generally. So we know that on the program today at the conference, you'll be listening to and talking about those main topics of artificial intelligence, of risk and risk management, of leadership, of course, and also resilience in business, but also personal resilience. We're very grateful to the board of Network USA and the committee for organizing the conference. Really looking forward to hearing from my colleagues as members of Chartered Accountants Ireland, Shane Rogers, who's emceeing the conference, and also Declan Scott, a consultant and entrepreneur who'll be talking to you about resilience and personal resilience. Thanks to all the supporters of the conference, to Fordham, Gabelli School of Business, and all of the sponsors. So I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I wish I was. I hope you have a really enjoyable and rewarding day. Thank you.
So, the time has come for our first set of speakers. And I'd like to echo, before we start, our thanks to Linda and Barbara Kelly from Fordham for making us very welcome here. We had a great day yesterday with young chartered accountants talking about the future of the profession and numerous other topics, which we'll publish an article on in due course. For now, I'd like to introduce our three speakers for the first session. Now, the first session is sponsored by Propylon. Breffney O'Donnell he's worked closely with us putting this conference together. Unfortunately, he can't be here today. He's at another conference in Europe, which he couldn't get out of. But what I'd like to do is invite up to the three seats we've got here, Dion Yenar, Simone Walsh, and Shalene Gallagher. Dion is a partner with KPMG. He's also on the KPMG board. Simone is a principal with BDO, based in Atlanta. And Shalene works with the Federal Reserve here in Boston. No, I'm in Boston. This is New York. That's right. Okay, so with that, I'd like to pass on. And Dion, you're our first speaker, so let me pass to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the invite. Really appreciate it. I think when David came to me and asked me to speak about leadership, it's not a topic I speak about that regularly. Obviously, each one of us have experiences and built up leadership skills through that. So I would say, I had to really think about, like, oh, how do I position this, right? And then when we got together, we said, well, why don't we just talk about our own personal experiences, and then what leadership we got, leadership qualities or experiences we got from that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a journal of my life, okay, and hopefully it doesn't bore you to tears here, but just to, and then really pick out what are the leadership qualities I got from those experiences. You know, some is learned from books as well, there's no doubt, and these days YouTube, right, because it's a source of all knowledge. And but at the end of the day, it is really the people that pour into you over your career that I feel has the biggest impact on how you act as a leader. So going way back, and because this is also to encourage young folks to go into the career of being a chartered accountant, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I started, my journey of thinking about where I'm going to be one day. So when I was the equivalent of a senior matric in South Africa, I really had no clue, right? I wanted to be a pilot, I want to be this, I want to be that. I mean, it was ridiculous. So just to get people off my back, I used to say, I want to go into business. And so, but what does that mean? I mean, business. Everybody's in business. If you're an artist, you're in business, right? So, one of my dad's friends said to me, well, I'm a chartered accountant. He was a pretty successful guy. He said, why don't you think about going into chartered accountant? Genuinely, I did not know what that was, right? I mean, obviously the accountant kind of gives it away. I don't know what chartered meant. It sounded cool, but who knows, right? So what I did is I went into the military first and did a part-time study. So I did Air Force. I went to the Air Force and I became an air traffic controller, actually a mission controller in the Air Force. And again, this is where your journey starts about learning, right? So what that teaches you is teamwork, the importance of teamwork. It teaches you discipline, which I definitely needed at that age, right? So, and but it teaches you a few things that you don't want to duplicate either. So the military is very hierarchical, and if I'm a lieutenant and I'm going to tell a sergeant what to do, that's how I'm going to do it. Whereas I did not like that philosophy. To me, if you have to use your title to get things done, that's not a good thing. So again, you learn the things that you had from there, the discipline, the tenacity, frankly, performance under pressure. If you're an air traffic controller, oh my word, I didn't realize, until you step out of it, like how much pressure you actually find. You're doing 4-hour shift. It's massive amount of pressure. But you learned a lot of things, but you learned what not to do and what leadership qualities you really don't like either. Anyway, so I decided, okay, well, this is a good thing. I'm going to go into chartered accountant. So I enlisted in the university in Johannesburg. For those from South Africa, it's called WITS. The whole name is University of the Witwatersrand, right? So long word. In America, nobody, I don't even bother, right? So I went there full-time, studied. I'm not a natural accountant. I worked like a dog to try and get this, but I knew that it'll help you get into, I just thought of it as middle management, right? It'll help you get into middle management, and then you can define your future from there. And well, I tell you what a great decision that was. So even though I slogged through it, and I really had to understand how, if you look at revenue recognition, a whole bunch of it, I really had to work hard at that. But it was a great program in South Africa, I'm sure, around the country, around the world. And so then I went into KPMG. I was only going to stay with KPMG for 3 years, and I'm celebrating my 33rd year with them in January, right? So that's how strategy changes, I guess, over time. But I was going to be there 3 years. That 3 years auditing was an amazing experience. But I was thinking about, okay, well, what's next? So they said, well, we're starting a deal advisory practice. This is 95, right? Or 94, around about there. Do you want to do this? So I said, well, yeah, I'm sure I'll do it. I'll go. I have no idea what they did, so I started doing due diligence and valuations. And I guess the leadership quality there was being open to doing different things and humble to learn, and just being a constant learner, right? So I really feel like those are leadership qualities that served me well later on in life. So I did that for a while. Then I got an opportunity to go to the US to rotate to Boston. And I took that. I was back in audit, financial services. I did not realize, rounding errors in that bank, Fleet Bank of Boston at the time, was as big as my annual revenue of the companies that I was auditing. So the scale in the US was just mind-blowing coming from South Africa. So now you start to think, okay, well, wow, this is a whole different market, a whole different ballgame. So again, what can you learn from it? So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So I was heading back to South Africa, and they said, well, we have this thing called International Development Center. It was called something else, but do you want to do a year or two there? So I'm like, it sounds like a plan. And this is where we develop centrally and export it basically to the world. So you deploy it to other countries, etc., etc. So I'm like, I'll stay in the US for another year or two. I think that sounds good, and learn a bit more of the culture and businesses, etc. And what I learned there, so I actually stayed 3 years. I've already told you, I've been here since 95 now, so clearly my 18-month rotation is still going on. But what I learned there is cultural awareness, because you had to convince Germany, Australia, other countries to pick up products and services that you are creating centrally. You had to make sure, you had to be innovative in your thinking, because you're looking at new things. You might talk about enhancements to the audit program, etc., audit process, but at the end of the day, you're looking at innovating new things. Now, we're talking about late 90s, right? So there was a lot of tech happening, not as much as now. I think the disruptive technology is amazing right now. So, but anyway, I learned a whole bunch of new skills, how to collaborate with people, how to use influence, again, as opposed to just telling them, this is a new product coming your way, do it, right? So really like that. Eventually decided to stay in the US, and then so rotated back to the field. Well, the field, it's client serving, client facing. So I went into New York in the early 2000s, and they asked myself and the team to develop something called enterprise risk management. I don't know, you might have heard of it. I think there's a topic later on today. I'm still super passionate about that topic. So again, we developed it, and this is from very little, really. So you have to understand what are clients really looking for. So again, the persona of the client, so again, from a leadership perspective, I think it is, who are you interacting with and how do they perceive what you're speaking about, right? So you might be an expert on the topic, but if they are not, how do you perceive, or how do you translate what you say so that it could be understood as well? And so I did that for a while, and eventually I led that in the US and globally. That was about 50 people, honestly. It was small, it was incubator, right? So it was quite manageable. And then around about 2015 or 16, they merged that with internal audit and SOX, and they asked me to lead that in the US and globally. I went from 50 to 1,000 people. Globally, probably more like 2,500. You're like, oh my word, what am I doing here? You know, like, and this needed to be transformed as well. So I felt like, wow, this is a phenomenal challenge, but I'm way out of my depth, right? So I figured, okay, well, you know, this is where you get your mentors in. Like, what do you think I should do first? These partners don't know me, so I've got a leadership team that really doesn't know me. So the guidance was, okay, well, let's create vision and strategy for this group so that you can move this forward. So I did that. I took 15 leaders from across the globe, and we had a facilitated session with the strategist. Now, I'm not a strategist, right? But I do know if I want somebody to follow a strategy, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be believable. It's got to be relatable. So if I had to say, well, we want to grow this to, you know, $1 billion practice, that might motivate some people, but frankly, you know, as a senior associate, you're like, yeah, well, what the heck does that mean for me, right? So what I learned through that process from a leadership skills perspective is how to create something that is just authentic. How do I create something that people can follow and relate to? And, you know, to me, and basically, you know, that allowed me to motivate people and stand in front of them authentically and get to know them, but also to talk about what it means for them. So in our internal purpose statement, client wasn't mentioned in it, right? Interesting enough, it was all about really how we're going to develop them, and selfishly through developing them, you're going to be helping the client. Because if you have somebody that's more versatile in how they interact with the clients, so it's not just internal or SOX, but they have ERM experience, they understand all those things, it actually helps the client. So it was basically achieving the objective, but from a purpose-led function. So I learned through that experience, like the whole thing around purpose-led strategies, right? So again, it was a great learning. You know, I was probably now, you know, early 50s, etc., right? So I mean, you know, I wouldn't say I wouldn't have known it before, but I had to implement it then. So that was a little bit different. So from a personal perspective, I always had a philosophy of being in a leadership role only for 5 years. I know if you're transforming a group significantly, maybe call it 6 years. But do not go for 10 years in the same role. And I actually, when I got the broader network role, which was internal SOX, ERM, etc., I publicly stated I'm in this role for 5 years. And part of it was I did not want partners to feel like, oh boy, you know, he's in his late 40s at the time. He's just going to ride this out till he has to retire at 60, and therefore, you know, what is my truth? And so I wanted them to know that I'm not here for the long term. I want to make as much impact as I possibly could, but then I want to hand it over to somebody else. So basically working your way out of a job. And so that's what I did, right? So I transformed it, helped them, and started to look at what is next for me. So what is next for me at the moment, it was mentioned briefly as well. So I moved back into, I've always been a lead partner, honestly. Even no matter what role I had, I just love that role, right? So being a lead partner, meaning you're connecting the dots for your clients. So they just put me onto 3 significant clients, right? I asked them whether I can incubate something called a board advisory practice. And we do have a significant board leadership center presence, meaning, you know, like more thought leadership, but I wanted to come alongside boards and see how I can help them. And frankly, it came out of a discussion about disruptive technologies and the lack of knowledge of the board in that area. So I started a peer exchange, etc., through that. So day job, really my main job is really lead partner of these 3 clients. And then the board advisory practice, and then I sit on the KPMG board. Now, sitting on the KPMG board, what a significant honor, I mean, there's no doubt about that, but it's new learnings again, right? So now it's an oversight role. And I tell you what, it was actually quite hard to take an operator role hat off and start to put an oversight hat on. And so now the types of questions you ask, again, to me, this is all leadership, right? It's leading, it's not leading questions, it's open questions, right? So it's like, so you can't, and even though I have significant knowledge of the business, you have to ask open-ended questions to management to really understand it better. And the other piece I love about it is you get your arms around the entire organization. Back office, the functions, all the rest of it, because otherwise you kind of narrow in your knowledge. So let me just wrap it up. Okay, so if I look at big picture wise, the leadership qualities that, if I look back, like what were the ones that I really value significantly now? There's many along the way, and quite frankly, I didn't list all the things I learned throughout, just in the interest of time. But I want to talk about, just summary-wise, but I also just want to talk about legacy very quickly as well. So if I think of the big picture things that I've learned, if just looking at over the years, one is make sure that what you do is purpose-driven, right? From a leader perspective. Be authentic. Be your authentic self. If you are trying to be, somebody you're not, they're going to see through it so quickly. So if I had to try to be authoritative, like everything, like it's my way or the highway, honestly, that's not what I am, right? I love to collaborate. Now and again, you have to make quick decisions. I get it, but I love to make sure that I bring people along. That's just my style. So be authentic, right? Listen and be humble, because at the end of the day, especially if you're starting things new, like I started a board advisory practice, I really didn't know, what was needed. The board doesn't have budget, right? So how am I going to further this cause, right? And there's probably a couple of things else that could come out of that whole story of my career. But I wanted to leave you really with the discussion around legacy, because legacy, how you define your legacy does drive your leadership style. So when I was about 30, a partner of mine, a mentor of mine, his name was Scott Showalter, he asked me, what is your legacy going to be? And quite frankly, I didn't think about it that much. I gave him an answer that was super shallow, frankly, just because it was more career-driven and position and all the rest of it. I said, well, go back and think about it a little bit more. And so I did, and I realized that a year after I retired from KPMG, maybe even less, people aren't going to be thinking about me day to day. They're not going to, they may remember me if a situation comes up. So I can't have my legacy be my position at KPMG. Honestly, it just makes no sense. But I can have a legacy in people. Like I've allowed people to advance, I've allowed them to pay mortgages and all the rest of it because of what I've done or the leadership position I've had. Now, they may not attribute it to me necessarily, but for me, that was what I then thought about legacy. Now, I was 30 years old, I was single, no kids at the time, so it wasn't in family. Now that I have both, I'm married now for 20 years and I've got 3 kids, I will tell you, I know where my legacy is now, right? My legacy is really in my family, there's no doubt about it. So to me, legacy on the family side, legacy, and how I not leave my family because my wife is the boss, we all know that, but I mean, how you interact with your family is also defined by who you are as a leader, right? I mean, how you interact with your kids. I've got 2 teenagers, it's not that easy to tell them what to do. I know you've also got some teenagers there, right? So it's not, so how you go about it, how you understand their perspective, all that kind of stuff comes through your leadership style. So, Scott Showalter retired many years ago. He's actually a professor at NC State. But I still think of him, right? So he made an impact. I don't even remember exactly what positions he really attained at KPMG and all the rest of it, but I remember him because he helped me think through what's important, actually. And that defines you as a leader as well, because if you want to be an arsehole, you can be an arsehole, but you're going to be remembered as that, but then you're going to be forgotten pretty quickly as well, right? So, and hopefully, is getting reported, so I was hopefully I could use other words there, David, that's what I'm saying. But, anyway, so I know that it's a lot of chartered accountants in the room, and I know you know the value of that qualification just to get you into a position. There's no ways I would have been where I am today, and I never could have dreamt that I can be even a partner at KPMG, frankly, if it wasn't for that sort of foundation that I got, right? So I value it tremendously. And even though as a kid I didn't necessarily know what it was, I am so grateful now, and I will definitely shout that from the rooftops, like the value of that and the foundation that it sets. So with that, I'm going to pause and hand it to, I guess, Simone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Simone Walsh. The accent is from Australia. 22 years ago, though, we took ourselves to London for 8 years. And 12 years ago, my husband came home from work one day and said, "Would you like to move to America?" And so our journey around the world has certainly been varied, and we're very, very fortunate to have done that. I want to talk today about my leadership journey in a similar way to Dion in terms of interspersing how my career has taken me around the world, what I've certainly learned from it, and what I can hopefully impart to others, those that are at earlier stages of their careers that may be watching this later. I am also a very passionate advocate of being a chartered accountant. I took the time to qualify twice. Wasn't really asked to do it the second time, I had to. So I became a chartered accountant in Australia in a typical way that many of you would have. I was very fortunate. I came out of university and went into Ernst & Young's graduate program. I took the audit path. Again, I think, and I can still, even though I'm taxed now, I cannot suggest strongly enough taking a turn through the audit world. You really get the basics of how companies run. You're thrown into all sorts of things. We have a new bunch of interns now. I'm back on the tax side at BDO. But I startle them when I tell them I used to add up and make sure financial statements actually were correct. So we are all very fortunate. We have benefited certainly from advances in technology and advances in the way that the world works. And I think we're all better off for that. I don't think we've worked out then how we take that next step. And we're going to talk a lot about AI and obviously the revolution in both the profession, the challenges that we have in terms of recruiting, and we'll get to that. But going all the way back to the beginning, I think Dion referenced as well, it's really important to seek out mentors and also then later in your career give back. Some of the most rewarding work I do at the moment is actually watching and helping others develop. But I know that when I started, I had a partner that said, create a busy life for yourself. And what he meant by that was, we were early days, we were all fresh out of school, very exciting, 40 of us, and we all thought we were pretty clever. It was proved otherwise many, many times over at my career, certainly. But we got in there and did our qualification. And I think that that's something to recommend to people. This may not seem exactly like leadership right now, but if you step up and get things done as soon as you can get things done, I found that hugely helpful. I encourage all our team members now that are going through qualifications, a CPA here, certainly chartered accountants if you've come from somewhere else, to really get that done sort of first. And that leads you to be able to do more at work. So if you think about leadership, again, particularly even if you're in a more junior stage of your career, like I was when I was coming up in Australia, I always put my hand up to do more. And you will see as you make that transition early in your career, you're very technical, you'll be rewarded and promoted because of those technical skills. You need to develop further and you need to be encouraged to see that that technical competence is only actually going to take you so far. We have now, I'm interestingly back in professional services after 25 years of doing something very different, being a VP of tax and head of tax and a CFO. So I do bring a unique perspective coming back into professional services. But whether you're in professional services or you're actually in business, the same applies. And so one of those hardest step-ups in anyone's career journey is going from that technical expertise into being a manager. And I explain how I see being a manager to team members and others in terms of having 3 steps. I think that the first is that you want to be able to self-manage. So do people know that you'll just do the work as it's asked and you'll come and tell me and you'll tell me if you can't do the work and that will be fine too. But being open to knowing that you're self-managing. Your work is in a good place, your life is in a good place. I think the reference Dean made also to your family, where you are at every age and stage. I reference, what is it that you're doing? Are you trying to do too much? Are you trying to do an exam and at the same time there's something going on with family? Or you really want to get to disco golf at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? And I didn't know that was a thing until I had someone that said that was really important to them. And so it's weighing all of that up at every sort of age and stage. But I think if you're self-managing, then people will come to you and people will sort of seek you out. The second piece I then talk to in terms of looking at management is then, can you project manage? Can you go and run something else? And can I give you something and can you draw other people in? And I think a lot of the time, leadership is looked at through the lens of a hierarchy, there's established roles, well, we know someone has a title, therefore there's a leader. I like to think everyone can be a leader and you can lead, and it does not matter. I mean, hierarchies exist for a reason in organisations, they just do. I shouldn't treat people differently because of it, but they exist. And I think that moving into that sort of project management piece and allowing people to see that you can actually run something and influence without authority. That's a real skill to say, irrespective of my title, I'm going to run a cross-functional project, I'm going to pull people in, I'm going to chase a partner down to do a review because that's what's really holding things up. And I think that's really helpful. And then the third most difficult piece is, can you manage people? And that's really the tricky one, because I think, again, certainly speaking in professional services, and the same happens in industry, you'll have someone that's technically competent and bright and really able to go, great, go and manage a team. And we didn't give them any tools whatsoever to manage a team. And that's really hard. I think one of my first leadership lessons I was working in the United Kingdom, and I had a fabulous boss. It's something I'll say now before I forget, have a great boss. Have a great boss. It's the single thing at any point in your career. If you don't have a great boss and it doesn't work, change that. Because I think, again, that will help you thrive, definitely. We had a fantastic leader. Sarah led the tax function at Sony for more than 20 years. And she was brilliant. So I had a team. I had a team from different countries. I clearly was not from England, as many of us were also not from England. But I had 2 managers and I was treating them exactly the same way. And I couldn't work out because I had a really good relationship with one and I had a terrible relationship with the other. And I sat down with my boss to sort of talk about that. And it really came about to, Dean referenced before, how do you work? Are you collaborative? Are you authoritative? How do people want to be treated? So I think the self-awareness through your career as well about how you like to work, and then the recognition of how others like to work is also really important. I had one of my managers that really liked a lot of feedback and wanted to check that I was doing things, and I was checking all the time. And I was doing the same thing to another manager, and it was driving him spare because he thought I didn't trust him, and he said, like, I've got this. And so we sat down and had that conversation. So I think that's another point to sort of make. Trust your instinct. You know when things aren't quite feeling right or could be better. And I think we are kinder now in business, I would say, over the scope of my career, or certainly I saw out working in organisations where we are certainly kinder. But you can have those open conversations. If you feel something's not quite great or it could be better, seek out ways to do that. And that might not necessarily be with that person. It's seeking that guidance. I am very fortunate. The organisation I'm in at the moment, BDO, is clearly it's national, global. I was on a video call yesterday, and we made reference to some of the initiatives firm-wide that were going on, and I was able to message someone to say, could you refer me to that person, and can I seek them out? And they put half an hour on the calendar for tomorrow. And so, again, take those opportunities. When you see that there's an expert or you think someone knows something that could be helpful, please do that. So that's the sort of three tenets of managers and management that I talk to all the time in terms of self-management, project management, people management. Then you look like a manager. And managing and leading are obviously very different, but to move on from that, I think that if you want to continue to progress your career, I've seen very few careers that just go straight up like that. Mine certainly went this way, that way, went down that way, back up again. You need to be open to all of that. But I think that encapsulating sort of circle of who you want to be and how you represent yourself, seeking out those other opportunities in terms of not just to the work you are doing in the organisation, getting involved. And I would say also putting your hand up. So always saying yes. Those open questions, how can I help? I was given good advice years ago where I had a leader that said it would be helpful for me if you swung by at the end of every day and just said, hey, what else do you need? I said, no problem. And I've done that ever since, everywhere I've been. I also tell people it would be really helpful if you could do that for me as well. And so I think keeping that communication going, understanding if you are in a collaborative environment and that's how you like to work, that's how we will win, is really just keeping that eye out. And I think the communication point also is critical there as well. So again, everyone's got heads down, busy. You assume sometimes people know what you're doing. They don't. They don't actually. I had a great leader once where I came in and started the conversation here, and she said, could you go back here? I look at this every 3 months, you look at it every day. I appreciate that. So just be aware of communication and communication style, and have those open conversations when you think things aren't sort of going the same way. Jumping across to the US, we moved over here 12 years ago and had a fantastic experience. I think in a similar way, we moved over here with a view to maybe staying 3 years and seeing a bit more of the country and traveling. And I had someone in kindergarten and I just went to his high school graduation. So life will take you like that. I think be open to those experiences. And I think in a similar way to what Dion referenced, sometimes what you think will happen will not, or often what you think will happen will not. I think coming back to the leadership point is seeking out those opportunities that are going to work for you. Find your fit is what I tell a lot of people. So I think where you can thrive is that, are you personally engaged? When I talk about goals with people, I think it's really important and relevant to the leadership point. I say from a work perspective, we find this happy medium where people can trust me and say, well, what are your goals? And what are your personal goals? And we're a for-profit business, so we have business goals. But when we can align that with the individual and then also the organisation, you will thrive. And I think seek that out. So I think if you seek that out, seek out the people that you can see you would like to work in a similar way or have opportunities to work with at every age and stage. So I'll finish and hand off to Shalene, just saying, say yes, take the opportunity and be open, and great things will come.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I'm going to stand a little closer to the table just so that I can keep myself honest in some of the thoughts I want to share. But it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you all today as part of this wonderful conference that we're back in person, and to talk with two amazing panelists about leadership. So there is incredible power in storytelling. And so I'm going to use some of my personal story to tell you a little bit about my perspective on leadership. I have a slightly different background from our two panelists in that I grew up on a very small island in Antigua, named Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean. And now I'm at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. I'm a regulatory data specialist. So at first glance, you might think, what does that have to do with chartered accountancy? But I promise I will explain how the connection is made. So having grown up in Antigua, my parents were middle class. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a telephone operator. Those of you who might know that the switchboard operator, that job does not exist anymore. I still remember being in the switch room and seeing her doing all of this and overhearing calls as people were trying to call out from the island. But I was a very introverted, shy child. And so, certain teachers have pulled that encouragement out of me to speak up and be involved. And I think of one teacher in particular who actually wrote in my report card one year that she's very talkative. And my parents were like, talkative? What are you talking about, right? But she was Canadian, and I remember she actually took the time to say to them, it's not a bad thing. Some people might say that that's being bossy, or she might sit and say to a child, teacher, let me show them, and that might come across as her feeling the need to control the situation. But she was like, no, that is an early sign of leadership. So nourish that, encourage that, because that willingness to see where someone needs help and step in and provide that help is something that a true leader needs to be able to do, and to do it innately as well. So that was my first real example of someone who said, leadership can be grown from a very young age. It doesn't require a certain level of experience. It really just requires a change in perspective. From there, my parents got an opportunity that they gave to me. For those of you from the UK, cable and wireless, I don't even remember if it's still called that. My dad was an engineer at Cable and Wireless. My mom was a telephone operator at Cable and Wireless. So, my dad got the opportunity to become the CEO of different branches in the Caribbean, and I was in high school at the time. So my parents said, okay, you can either choose to move with us every couple of years, start over, make new friends every year and a half, 2 years, or you could just pick a school and go to boarding school, have your same set of friends, live your life, and move on. And I thought, this is a chance, I'm gonna take it. And I don't know why people thought we were crazy at the time. Maybe it was the precociousness in me. My parents let me decide. So I decided to go to a boarding school in Canada. Maybe that Canadian teacher in primary school helped. And off I went. Although I wouldn't say that my perspective on the world was narrow, it was definitely a lot more limited. I'd only ever been to New York to visit family, Florida to go to Disney World, and a handful of other islands in the Caribbean. So moving to a town outside Toronto, seeing snow for the first time, walking through knee-deep snow for the first time. Yeah, with icicles on trees. It was life-changing experience. But I would say it was also life-changing in that, we had to do community service and play a sport and still excel in school. So that real focus on doing all of those things at the same time taught me balance. And it really taught me prioritization. It taught me how to be able to say, I'm overwhelmed right now and I need some help. Or vice versa, to see in someone else and say, I think so-and-so needs some help. Talking about cultural awareness, my roommate in high school was Japanese. I'd never met someone from Japan before, right? So that interaction and having friends from all over the world taught me to have an open perspective. It taught me cultural awareness. It expanded my mindset so that I could see and understand and appreciate the different ways people looked at the same situation. And that is something that is also critical to a good leader, to be able to see and to feel and to understand. You and I might both walk up the stairs and I think, oh, it's a beautiful day, it's so sunny. But then you could look out and go, oh God, it's so hot outside, right? And I have to understand that that's your perspective. While I was in Canada, I did have an opportunity again, after completing my bachelor's degree, to interact with even more people. So some of my bachelor's teachers were very unique. And that's an easy thing to say and also can be a nuanced thing to say. But there were two in particular that come to mind. And one of them was very kind. I was in Canada, I knew almost no one, and he invited me to his home along with his wife for Canadian Thanksgiving, which I think is a week before American Thanksgiving. And that was the best turkey I've ever had, by the way. I don't know what he did. He was French Canadian, and it was wonderful. But that moment of kindness and of empathy, to be able to see that, okay, she's on her own. What can we do? Let me bring her in so that she feels that sense of community was wonderful and really touched me, but also taught me a very important lesson. Another professor was someone who worked in industry. So he wasn't a professor, so to speak. But he was a wonderful teacher, and he would often take time outside of class to sit with students while having lunch to really help us understand, like, everything you just learned in the classroom, this is how you apply it to real life. This is how you make it real. This is what it means. And he really stood out for me as someone who broke the stereotype. Like, you don't have to be a certain type of professor. You don't have to be a certain type of professional. But you can also take the time to educate others and to pull them forward in their journey, which is also another thing that I think a great leader has to do. Once I finished my bachelor's degree, I really did wonder, what next? What should I do next? And at that time, my parents had retired, so no more switchboard and no more engineering. But they got offered the position of working at the High Commission for Antigua in London. And so, although they had always said to my brothers and I, like, we will cover the cost of a 4-year degree for all of you, I thought, the precociousness of me is like, I'll do my bachelor's in 3 years and use the last year to do my master's. So you said 4 years, I'm gonna use 4 years. So off I went, again, picking up, moving to another country one more time, working in London as well afterwards at a small accounting firm, and then at the High Commission as well. But I would say during my time of study, I met this amazing chartered accountant. He was Irish, and he was teaching management accounting as part of our program. And the class was hard. It's almost like he made a point of making it the hardest class in the program. But something about that drew me to him because he set a very high standard for all his students. And he told us, I don't care what your grades were before you came here, don't expect above a 70. Mind you, some of us did get above a 70, but the challenge was laid. And that was the point. The point was, I want you to push yourself beyond what you think you can do, because you can do it. And he was someone who actually told me, you should become a chartered accountant. And I thought, my mother's been telling me that for years. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. But eventually I did listen to him and I applied. I said, let me go to Dublin for 1 year at the time and study at the Dublin Institute of Technology, which is called something else now, to do a postgraduate diploma in accounting. But while I was there, all the other students were applying for training contracts with KPMG, BDO, PwC, Mazars, etc. And I just thought, why not? Apply, throw my name in the hat, see what happens. I eventually accepted a contract with PwC, so I trained in assurance, and I agree, training in assurance is a wonderful way to open your eyes to so many things. And while I was there, I would say because of the economic situation in Ireland at the time, majority of the students who were in my program or in my training contract with me were from other fields, engineering, music, teaching, all of it. So it really brought such diversity in thought and perspective to the way we approached the data we were trying to audit. And that was just such an important example to me, is to seek out those opportunities to speak to people who are not like you, who can think of things differently than you do, who may consider factors that you are not even aware of. Because that really does not just broaden your perspective, but the output of the work that you're doing to make it a stronger product and to make it better for your clients. Fast forward after 3 years, which I agree, getting those exams done was a slog. It was not easy by any means, but once I got it, and it was at the end of my training contract, again, I asked myself, what's next, right? I never lived here in the States. I have family here, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I could do that. There was a firm, some of you know it, Cross Country Consulting, that was seeking chartered accountants to help with their audit clients here in the US because of the strength of our qualification and because of the breadth of our experience and our ability to just walk into a room and interact. So I jumped at that opportunity and I moved here, worked there with them and then with another consulting firm for a few years. And everything I learned, everything I did was just wonderful experience, but the last consulting client was the most challenging for me. And that was because they asked me to stand up their regulatory reporting requirements for this new report they had to file to the Federal Reserve. And that required me to teach myself what it was and then build out the framework, the governance, the controls, all of it for them to meet this requirement. So you can imagine it's a lot of pressure for one person to come in and do this for a very large organization. But it really opened my eyes up to the opportunities that are out there. And that perfectly placed me for when a friend said, you know, Shane, there's an opening coming up at the Fed. Would you consider applying for it? Because you're kind of doing the work anyway. And it didn't occur to me to ever think I could work at the Federal Reserve. So that person who had never worked with me saw something and opened a door for me, right? And I think that's something else that a good leader has to do, to be able to see those opportunities, to create them, to create that space for other people to grow and to excel. Now that brought me to the Fed, where although I deal with data every day, and I said I tie in with the accounting piece, I do actually use a lot of the accounting training that I've gotten through the qualification at the Federal Reserve. So a big part of my job is interpreting regulatory reporting requirements, which are grounded in GAAP and in some cases in IFRS. So every now and then I have to dust off my IFRS books and you know, tie things together for our international firms who are filing to the Fed. Now, again, you might say, Shane, why are you telling us all these snippets of your life? And what does that mean for the story of leadership? And really, to me, each story I just told you pulls on a thread that has made me the leader that I am today. Having that sponsorship, that mentorship, having people open doors for me, having people teach me about different perspectives and cultural awareness, those are all critical factors to being a good leader. As Simone mentioned, communication styles, to be able to change your tone, your word choice, how you speak to someone between them being a junior associate to the CEO of a company. You need to be able to do both, sometimes simultaneously in the same conversation. So that agility, mentally, emotionally sometimes, is something that I think, along with the softer skills, build on the technical skills that chartered accountants have. And that's the beauty of this qualification, is that it's not just about understanding how to read a balance sheet and an income statement. It's really about understanding how to be agile, how to learn on your feet, how to pivot real time in a room, how to interact with a lot of different people in a lot of different situations, often under high pressure, and to come out, cool, calm, and collected, but to still be able to do that work, even though you might be quaking on the inside. And so, to me, leadership is a couple things, and I just want to close this out by saying, leadership is about empathy. It's about compassion. It's about authenticity, like Dion mentioned, right? It's about communication, like Simone mentioned. It's really about being a well-rounded person, about leveraging the experiences you've had over the years of your journey to not just impact the people around you, but to continue to educate you in what you could do better going into the future, and to pull people along with you. So you have to lift as you climb and create that space. So for the students who are ultimately going to listen to this after the fact, and for those in the room, regardless of your age, your career, your tenure, be a mentor, be a sponsor, in the same way that someone was that for you. Be a role model. Seek out those who need help. Offer it willingly. Say yes. Challenge yourself, push yourself, because those are all really important factors to being a really impactful and effective leader. So with that, I think I'm handing it to David for some Q&A.
Thank you very much, Shirley. So thank you to our three speakers, Dion, Simone, and Shirley. Great job. Now we have time for any questions. Who would like to ask a question? Wait, because I'm going to give you the microphone.
Hi, everyone. This is a question to the panel, but also to everyone in the room. I started accounting 50 odd years ago, so I realize I'm a dinosaur. But at that time, chartered accountancy was the MBA of its day. It was the path to management. And it was a real honest to goodness path, not just to FD, but also to MD. And so when I came to the United States, I was very surprised that CPAs didn't seem to have that same path. In fact, I think it's accepted now that you don't have to be a CPA to be a CFO. There are different skills that are looked for. So, but I still see among our members, people thriving. So what is it about the chartered accountancy training that enables CAs to thrive in the way that CPAs don't seem to do as well? Or am I just totally off the wall?
Thank you, Ian, for the question. So I would say some of what I referenced with one of my earliest mentors talking about creating a busy life for yourself. I think that the qualification does require discipline and study. At the same time, you are holding down a job and excelling in that. Most people still go into large accountancy and consulting firms as they're going through that practice. A lot is asked of you. You will be on a larger client. You will be doing a lot of work hours. You will be asked to also pass your exams. I think that discipline and creating that busy life, when you pass that exam, you've got the ability to do more. I can't speak for the CPA qualification, but certainly I know that so much is required to get there. I think it does, and it's held in high regard and held in high esteem. So you have self-starters applying, you have people that do want to then utilise it to move on. Maybe there's a natural inclination there to be very driven and move forward at perhaps a faster pace.
We're on dangerous ground. In the US, we can't potentially. So I'll just say, if I look, I'll just reflect on my journey, right? So for the 4 years that we had to study in order to be able to write the board exam, I did 4 years of accounting, 3 years of management accounting, 3 years of auditing, tax for probably 3 or 4 years. I mean, the foundation was massive, right? I mean, honestly, so you could walk into articles, and which I did in the smaller companies, and they say, can you help me on my tax return? And you could do that. In the US, it's a different story. And I think part of it is scale. Like, people specialize very, very significantly here because of scale. In the smaller markets, honestly, you had to do almost everything and you had to figure it out, right? Just with that foundation. And I know that in the US, in order to sit for the CPA, that's another thing I had to learn, sit not right, but sit for the CPA, you needed far fewer sort of accounting credits or auditing credits, etc. So the foundation is just much broader, I think, for the CPA. So whether it's good or bad, I feel like at the end of the day, I think the character of the person will define where they end up in life one day. But what I appreciate about the foundation is it taught you how businesses are run. How does cash flow? How does supply chain work? And that was part of the training as well, obviously in articles, but the foundation set by the universities in whichever country you studied in, for me, South Africa, was amazing because it was hard. Like I said, I'm not a natural born accountant, so it was a hard slog, but it taught, so that foundation I think is different. I'll leave it at that.
Any other questions? Go to Barbara.
Not a question as much as just trying to respond to the original question posed. the difference between chartered accountants and CPA are so vast that trying to respond to it succinctly wouldn't do it justice. So, in the interest of being brief, I do serve as the dean of the graduate school here at Fordham. My great colleague here, Kelly Olto, oversees our accounting programs. So one of the things that are very clear in the US is we don't put the same weight on experience and opportunities to practice as part of the credential, which is what I understand chartered accountants does. So that when we're graduating students, many of them have not had the same robust opportunities in terms of learning through experiences in public accounting. And I think that changes the way that the degree and the credential is perceived. So if you're hiring someone who's newly minted CPA and has graduated, they might have 150 credits, whether they have a master's degree or not. They may have very, very limited practice in terms of their experience. Whereas if you're coming from chartered accountants, and you're an ACA, you are perceived to have a significant amount of awareness of what is being conducted in practice. And I think that brings great value. I would prefer the CPAs more aligned with chartered accountants worldwide. And that's one of the reasons why we're such great supporters of the institution. And I'm very pleased to have you all here. So I think it's an excellent question. I think on a whole, the United States is trying to catch up with Europe. We're only 10 years behind, so we're making great progress.
Thank you. Any other questions? Peter? Just one question.
I don't understand those remarks. Just a piece of history. The ACA, the forerunner of CAW, was founded by Angus McDowell, and I shared an office with him, literally 40 years ago. And during the 90s, there was a huge amount of work that we tried to do to merge the CPA and the CA into one much more homogeneous system. And it was a disaster. The difference between the training that a chartered accountant gets anywhere in the world is so much, I've got to be careful how I say this, it's so much better than the CPA qualification. And we worked on this for about 4 years before we said, look, this ain't going anywhere. And that's now 20 years ago. So I'm still a huge advocate for the quality, keeping the quality of the chartered accountant, globally at the top. It's incredibly important. And I've actually got a view that we've got a huge opportunity to make the chartered accountant job way bigger and more important for the modern world than we're sort of coasting in my view. Anyway, that's another subject. But that's a little bit of history.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? David Freeman.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the three of you for telling your stories. I found it captivating. We're all here for different reasons. Most people, I suspect, this was never planned to be the place you'd end up. But my question is about something called the imposter syndrome, which I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically something that professionals particularly suffer with, which is to have self-doubt in your capabilities and your knowledge, and you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing because you're just simply not qualified. And I was wondering, each of you told your story, but was there any point where you suffered from self-doubt, and what did you do about it?
So yes, is the answer, absolutely. I think at many points in my career, I'll take it back to being a chartered accountant, actually. You know, that we are driven and taught appropriately that things have to be good, correct, proper, and the standards up here. And so then as you step into your career and you're starting to learn to do different things, I certainly felt that I had to have a mastery up here before I could say, oh, I could do that. So that certainly happened. I know when I became a CFO of a publicly traded company in the US, it's like, whoa, who put me in charge? And I think again, then you need to have good friends and colleagues around to trust yourself, and also be really open to saying, I know how to do this, I don't know how to do this, and I will figure it out. But I think that network of support you've got around yourself helps enormously. I think experience, which is another word for age, helps hugely as well. So I think a lot of that self-doubt that I had earlier in my career, you just have to do away with because you won't move on. But certainly, I've certainly experienced it. I've certainly then lent on others to help me through it. And it's not uncommon for anyone that's in this room or out there thinking, oh, should I be here? You absolutely should. And it's a case of stepping forward. Some of the greatest ways we learn is by making mistakes. And you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to do it the right way. Privately is much better than publicly, but having the ability and surround back to the point I'd also made about find your fit and your environment, to be in a position to make those mistakes is going to help take away from that imposter syndrome, to be feeling really comfortable and confident that you're really great at your job. And I'm sure every person in this room is really great at their job. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's something that actually has been on my mind for the last few weeks, is something that is especially pertinent for women in this industry, and even more so for women of color in this industry, is that pause, that should I be here, right? And I think addressing imposter syndromes requires a moment of vulnerability to acknowledge that it's there in the first place. And then a moment of pause to say, how do I counter the inner voice that's telling me I shouldn't be? So I'm going to use vulnerability and give you a perfect example. This morning I woke up and I said, I have to speak today, right? And writing a bio for a conference is a very interesting exercise, by the way, because you write all these wonderful things and then you go, oh God, is that me? And so I looked at the bio and the imposter syndrome started, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to go and speak. And he said, no, she's me, I am she. People want to hear what I have to say. And so it's that moment to pause and say, hold on, it's just a voice, it's a small voice, you don't have to listen to it. You have the qualifications, you have the experience, you have the perspectives that people want to hear. And so I think everyone, regardless of your tenure, your age, your experience, you're gonna have moments where you think, oh God, am I the person that should be in this room right now? And it's really about just pausing, slowing down, and saying yes. Yes to the opportunity, yes, I can do it, and no to the self-doubt.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks for the very insightful sharing. I just have one question. So I think the consensus is that because of there is now a variety of other professions available, like computer science, data analytics, which is quote unquote more popular among the younger ones. So what are your thoughts in terms of how do we, what is the value proposition of the accounting profession, and how do we, I guess, attract the younger ones into the profession?
I'll be brief on this answer because I actually think we've got some working sessions that are going to address exactly that. But I will draw your attention, yesterday, one of the Big Four accounting firms said they were going to make $1 billion investment in bringing through the younger generation. And so I think part of what's happening, and I think this is a really good lunchtime discussion, part of what's happening, and I've talked to deans of accounting schools in Atlanta where I am, the wages aren't the same. That's a problem. I was told by someone we actually needed to raise our prices. I'm like, see how that goes. But I think there is a lot to do and counter in the value and what people are stepping out of college into, and the salary they see, and the investment they just made in a substantial cost of education, in particular in the US, and the salary's not there. That's actually one of the real challenges. I don't know if anyone else has got.
I think one of the really crucial value proposition aspects that is often forgotten with this qualification is, at least my experience has been training, is, after your first year, you learn a little bit, and the second year you learn something new, but you have to go back and teach the next first year what to do, right? And to be able to explain that real time and provide them constructive feedback. So there's this built-in feedback loop that you don't necessarily get with all other professions. I think the computer science, the engineering, you come up, you get a job, and you're like, great, you know all of this, off you go. But what's unique about this qualification is it also puts you in a place to start learning how to manage a team before you even get in the door, right? So you're set up to know when to say yes. You're set up to know when to go to your manager. Is there anything else I can do? Or to see something and make that suggestion, which is slightly different than some of the other fields. So I think the beauty of this qualification is it's not just about giving you a certificate that says you are great at crunching numbers. It's also you are a well-rounded person who can go into any industry and do more than crunch the numbers, which is crucial, I think, in a world that's ever changing, ever evolving. I mean, a lot of the people I qualified with don't work in practice anymore. They're starting their own firms. They understand balance sheet, income statement, how a business works, so they can go and do their own thing. They can become entrepreneurs. Some of them became teachers, going back and teaching how to do that. And many became partners as well. So it places you in a different position that I think is unique compared to the other fields.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, it's just me. It's just me. Hi, so I'm not a chartered accountant, I'm just here. But I'm a person, as Declan just kind of said. So really what I wanted to ask is, how do you go about advocating for yourself with senior management as you progress, from the bottom up, essentially? How do you make the case to show that you are worth more money or a promotion or whatever, but also how do you kind of shout about what you do without looking like you're bragging? Those are things that would interest me.
Yeah, I'm close to
Well, I got to tell you, I very seldom mention that I'm a chartered accountant. I mentioned earlier, I don't even mention like my title, like partner title, whatever. To me, what the chartered accountant gives you is that foundation to build on. And after that, it's your experience, credentials, what you've done, how you lead people that really bring you forward. So I've never had a conversation, listen, I'm a chartered accountant, I'm worth more than this person, and therefore I need to be earning more. I've literally never in my career had that conversation. So to me, it's all about what the qualification means to you foundationally. And really after that, it's really what you do with it, right? So I don't do debits and credits. I've done debits and credits for, 25 years probably, or somewhere around about there. I'm in business. I really am in, so day to day, I'm looking at master data modeling. I'm looking at all these things at my clients, which is nothing to do with my base, but it gave me permission to understand how business operates, that I mentioned earlier, and from there, you just take that to where you want to go. So, not to sure I answer your question directly, but
Thanks.
Okay, and with that, let's close our session. We've run a little bit over, but that's fine, we'll make it up. So please thank our speakers. For the next presentation, which is on AI and third-party risk, just give us a couple of minutes, and then after that, we'll break for our lunchtime session.
Great feedback when I came last year and spoke. Integration of AI and GRC. We're taking a little bit more specific this year. A little bit about myself. So Andrew Gunter, I'm one of 3 partners at Essential, have been in the risk management compliance space for 10 plus years. I'm an attorney by trade, so when it comes to beyond accounting, I'm really focused on the beyond part. My other business partner who couldn't make it here today, Yanni, you can see his name up. He is our accountant at the firm. I'm the attorney. But luckily we have David Ponder with us, who is one of our brilliant partners who really focused a lot of his time around AI, audit, IT, GRC, really kind of a gamut of pieces. I come from a Target Corporation, PwC, and ultimately Essential background, where I focus my practice around helping organizations build out risk management, compliance management practices, and integrating technology to support it, like GRC technologies and AI. David, I'll let you introduce yourself to Essential.
Yeah, my name is David Ponder. I am not Yanni Winslow, so sorry for the disappointment. Anyone who was here last year at the Yanni president with Andrew here. But hopefully I'll stand in and fill some large shoes. At Essential, we do a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. So a tough act to follow with Liam and Shalene and Simone. Excellent presentation. They were all talking about the people side of things and leadership. And we're going to talk more about the process and technology side of things. So think about the golden triangle. We'll take those other 2 legs after that excellent presentation. A little bit about myself. I started out my career, if you had told me that I'd be presenting in front of you all, how's that gonna work? I started out in MIS and got my first position out of college was with Bearing Point, formerly KPMG Consulting, but it was at the Defense Information Systems Agency, and I was doing coding of financial applications. So found my way through Ernst & Young, right, and started to get a little bit more into this world. Did a lot of SOX support, IT audit work. I was in their IT risk and assurance group. There were some clerks for assurance in that first group. And then made my way to found Essential in 2015. So we've been around going on 10 years doing all of this, and this is about what we do. And I'm going to start off by talking about, I'm going to introduce this topic of third-party risk management by talking about something that should be familiar to most of us. I'm talking about my morning coffee. So there's a place in town that I like to go for my morning coffee. It's called the Webster Groves Coffee Garden. And I'm from St. Louis, and Webster Groves is a suburb neighborhood in St. Louis. And this place to me gives me an experience with my coffee, right? I can envision what it's going to be like when I go get a coffee in the morning. I'm thinking that I may have just finished a bike ride with my kids and they're getting hot chocolate with me. I'm ordering a latte or something like that and sitting at a picnic table. Oftentimes they have live music. I'm there for the experience, I'm there for the coffee. I know that they have high quality coffee. I know it's consistent, I've been there many times. And it serves as a ritual to me and has become my go-to, right? Like during the week, I might pick something else just out of convenience or because I'm in a rush. But if I get the choice, this is the way that I want to experience.
And this is very different than my coffee experience. My mother-in-law moved in with me in the last year, and she insisted we get rid of the coffee pot and replace it with Keurig. So my coffee experience compared to David's, where it's very fine, this nice coffee shop, is we put it in the pot, we push it down, and I get my coffee a minute later, one pod at a time. Very, very wasteful, but it works for me. But David, as you're going through those coffee decisions, talk to us a little bit about how you came to be this. Now, if Yanni was here, Yanni's the snob. He's the coffee snob around it, where he will care about the specific bean, where it came from. He'll give you the full lectures, but instead you're going to get David's experience, which is
Mine basically is it not Folgers or Maxwell House? Then I'm good. But no, seriously, there are many things that go into making a good coffee, and I'm aware of those things. Maybe not to the level that Yanni is, but let's pretend, huh? So roast, right? The roast affects the entire flavor profile. Something that has been roasted less is going to allow the acidity and the flavor to come out of the beans, or something that's roasted a little bit more, you're going to be tasting the roast. You're going to be tasting a lot of the toastiness of it. The taste and the flavor, that has to do with where the beans are sourced, the region that they come from, etc. Consistency, right? You're going to look for consistency in your product. If I purchase a certain brand and bean of coffee, I would like it to taste, as close to as possible across time. I'd like to have that same experience that I had, that I came to love. And then there's things that you do too, right? You put in milk, it could be whole milk for creaminess, or some sort of a nutty milk for nuttiness and flavor, and so on and so forth. And each one of these things are a decision that you make about what seems to be a simple choice, a cup of coffee.
And what I didn't hear in that list was anything that was really related to third party yet, but let me throw a scenario out at you. You find out that your favorite roaster, the beans are sourcing from used child labor. Do you still go with that coffee shop?
Absolutely not.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, unless this is my house. Yeah. We're pro-child labor in my house.
Your children. Choice between Folgers and the child labor beans at the roasted coffee.
Yeah, I'm reluctantly choosing Folgers there.
Now, and that lines up is that, did you ever ask the question ahead of time going to this coffee shop about child labor?
Yeah, didn't cross my mind.
No, most people don't. You assume that they're meeting all those standards. And there was research done by I believe, Journal of Economics Philosophy. They put out a paper that is called the bad news impact on consumers' decision making. They don't always care about the good news or all the work that you've done to prevent something to happen, but the moment something bad does happen, child labor comes out, you didn't find out one of your roasters or one of your farmers was using it, that's when it has a negative impact on your organization. And so you take that into consideration here is that David never once asked the question, where are you sourcing those beans? Do they use child labor? Maybe he cared about a little bit about fair trade, organic, but most of the time when the bad news comes out, that's when you really feel an impact. And right now we're just talking about coffee and small organizations, but if you were to grow this out into significantly larger ones like Starbucks, now they're using thousands of farmers, thousands of third parties to go to help source beans and bring them into their facilities or into their stores. And so this really comes down to third-party decisions. Who are you selecting your organization's third parties? And what is a third party is probably the more important question here. So when we say third party from an organization perspective, really what we're talking about is any entity that your organization works with, whether it's another business, a partner, a consultant, as well as their third parties. So you may be contracting with one organization that's sourcing those beans are sourcing it from another individual that's farming it, and the list goes on from there up. All those spots become potential third parties as well as potential risks in your overall supply chain.
Now, if you think about it, there's two things to think about I'd like to bring up about that. So now you've got your third party, fourth parties, and fifth parties and things. And this becomes a tough challenge if you are trying to assess multiple entities. This is a challenge that has been tried to be addressed over and over again. We're all familiar with what has become SSAE, formerly it was SAS 70, now it's SOC reports, right? It was SSAE 16, now it's SSAE 20. That's one way that it's tried to be addressed. Other ways that it's tried to be addressed have been through private organizations like shared assessments, coming up with standardized questionnaires that can be sent out to everyone. And if you think about the demand that this places across the industry, right? Thinking about third-party risk and ways to lower your risk and to be compliant, there are regulations that have come out that have really highlighted this challenge. The ESG, the proposed ESG that just came out. It was proposed by the SEC. It was the most commented rule in its comment phase ever. I think there were more than 14,000 comments, public comments that were made on the rule. And I believe it's still in draft format, probably because of that. And one of the biggest and most contentious areas of it was around the scoping, right? So there was scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And on scope 3 emissions, you were responsible for not just your third parties, but also knowing about your fourth parties, your fifth parties, all down the chain, right? And people raised their hand and said, wait a minute, this is really tough to deal with. We don't know how we're gonna get our arms around this. And I think it's something that they're still struggling with trying to understand. You don't think about that when you make your initial decision for purchase, right? We're talking about a coffee thing here. But it is important enough that it will impact the business and potentially the entire industry if you think about the risk that is involved.
And what David's really describing here is just the overall third-party risk management. And most of the time when we talk third-party risk management, organizations think of, all right, I'm identifying my vendors, I'm performing some sort of risk assessment. Usually it starts out just in the cybersecurity space. And that's where a lot of them end. But it goes significantly further than that to really do this correctly, because what you haven't heard us talk about once yet today is cybersecurity concerns, except for the fact that it's on the screen right now. All the risks we've talked about were non-cybersecurity. They're risk-based, event-based, financial, compliance, operational, all those type of concerns. And this is pretty normal for most organizations that we see. They always start with cybersecurity. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I'm ex-Target. In 2013, we experienced a major data breach. At that time, there was a huge concern and a lot of money put into cybersecurity as the #1 risk when it came to third parties. So what did most organizations do? They invested in cybersecurity, third-party risk management, and ignored a lot of these other areas.
There's some other reasons why cybersecurity is typically the area where third-party risk management starts. But if you think about it just from a coffee example, when you go purchasing coffee, sitting between you and the barista is probably a point-of-sale system, right? A piece of technology. And around that point-of-sale system, you're going to be transmitting financial data, customer information, potentially PII. And all of a sudden, you start to think of things as we do, right? Especially as my history with PCI compliance, IT audit comes into play when you're talking about taking payment cards. There's a regulatory aspect now that comes into play. There is a compliance aspect that comes into play with a piece of technology. So small and medium-sized organizations, they don't typically start the process of third-party risk management out of a desire we really want to start a third-party risk management program. No, it's usually because they are required to by some sort of a regulation or law in the beginning, and that sets the seed for them to say, okay, this is something that we have to do, and that starts the part where then they realize it, they address that piece of it, often starts in cybersecurity, and then it grows from there.
And where usually it grows from, it starts again about just initially identifying those vendors, assessing those vendors, and then it's the spot. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Yep. This jump right here is where we see most organizations fall down, because they run out of time, they run out of resources to take beyond just that initial assessment into ongoing monitoring. If you assess your vendor once, that vendor's probably not going to be the same in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, nor is it probably our interaction with them is going to be the same, because our business relationship evolves over time. And from there is, what if we actually identified issues? I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to an organization and they say, yes, we have a third-party risk assessment. We documented, they had some issues, but the business moved forward from anyway. Good enough, we're done. What about all those issues? How are we actually remediating those? And finally, how are we reporting and continuously improving upon that program? And what this cycle shows and what we see is that it's a huge manual lift to get to this spot. And I think that's kind of the message around this is when it comes to people, process, technology, the process is there, or it could be there, but it's the people and the will and the manpower or the people power to really get this to do this right. And that's where AI begins to step in and make a difference here.
Yeah, we end up seeing organizations that are struggling with the burden of handling this entire process because of resource constraints. Small and medium-sized organizations, don't have the resources to dedicate to a full well-developed, mature third-party risk management process a lot of times. And especially if it's compliance-driven, they're looking at it as a check-the-box activity, trying to make sure that they are compliant, and they look at it almost like a point-in-time thing. Okay, you know, we passed that assessment, we got the certification, or we got clearance with the regulatory body. Now let's get back to business. And that's not, obviously, we all know that's not the right way to look at things. There's a monitoring component and an ongoing continuous sustainability component to any good third-party risk management program. And I think that's where there's really an opportunity here when we talk about AI.
So we've started going down this process of determining how the AI can be leveraged here. We have one demo, we're working on multiple other ones. We'll talk through what that could look like and how that can be integrated. Oh, I jumped over this slide. Anything else you want to add on integrated risk management here, Phil?
Well, yeah, I mean, to revisit the concept of what starts third-party risk management and what matures third-party risk management, I just think it's important to hit on the fact that you can see here, this is the integrated risk management wheel, so to speak. It calls out a bunch of major process areas that happen across the second and third lines of defense. These should all look familiar to you. And there tends to be this chicken or egg scenario with third-party risk management, which is third-party risk management driving the maturity of the broader integrated risk management program, or is it the other way around? And if you think about why that's the case, why that chicken or egg scenario exists, is because they share parts of this process. And I think this is, kind of a hook to say, look, if you can use a technology like AI to help automate any piece of this, you're going to get benefit across other major process areas potentially as well. And with third-party risk management, think of the things that Andrew just talked about. He talked about issues management. That's going to be a process that's shared amongst these. You can think about the foundational aspects of the things that go into third-party risk management, knowing who your vendors are, knowing your products and services, inventorying them. All these things serve as a base foundation for risk data across these other major process areas. And if you can gain efficiency and share that efficiency among them, it's a multiplier effect.
This reminds me of one of our clients we work with is in the tire industry. And during the enterprise risk assessment process, what we identified was they had an issue where 90% of their tires were being produced in China. And the US-Chinese relationship is sometimes a little rocky, let's just put it that way. But it's unlikely, but what happens if the US put major sanctions on China for any number of activities? What would that do to their business? Now, there's a third-party risk element in here regarding who are they sourcing their tires from a manufacturer's perspective, that when they're getting shipped over. There is a business continuity perspective of if the Chinese exports were shut down, they were no longer able to receive those tires, what would happen? And then an overall operations perspective of how do we continue operations? Now, what they've started doing is they begin to move some of the production out of China and pushing it to India to try to diversify their risk. So that's one way it starts to get into third-party risk management around where are manufacturers located, how are we working with them, and do we need to diversify a little bit? We're beginning to integrate multiple elements here of third-party risk management, enterprise risk management, some incident management in there, business continuity, all that come together to help better manage risk and better operate your business.
And I think it's worth mentioning that's one of the goals, especially the small and medium-sized organizations that don't have a lot of resources. They still want to mature their program and get past looking at this is just a compliance exercise. They would like to get to the point where they are using their risk data to protect their business objectives, that true risk management decision making, and again, efficiency can drive that.
So, as I alluded to just a few minutes ago, we do have this first example of the example here. What we've done is we've integrated a AI directly into one of the GRC platforms. This one is Archer, but it could really be any platform. In this case, all we're doing is just trying to fill out the initial profile of the vendor. So this is like step one when it comes to the third-party risk management process. What was done was we put in the name of IBM. We can put some additional details if we want, click save, and that's actually queuing up the AI to begin to perform the work. So in a second, what you're going to see is it's going to populate information about the vendor. A description around it, their a number of employees, the DUNS number, I think the ticker symbol's on there, and here it comes, we calculate. Boom. Relationship overview, some general risk considerations. As it continues to go down, it will continue to add pieces to it. This type of work can take anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple hours for any individual to do. AI was able to do that in about a minute and a half. Now, this still requires human intervention. Humans should still go and look at this to review that it's accurate. But this type of capability just wasn't even available about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago. Last year when we gave this presentation, I think we talked about AI is only good up to about 2022. Now it has full access to the internet and the data can be live and we can start pulling that information in. So the capability around what we can do is continue to exponentially grow from month over month where we were.
A little bit more context about this. We have the ability to give the AI contextual data about who we are as an organization and about what questions we are asking it for. And we're doing that on a field-by-field basis here and at the instance level so that the AI knows what entity they're working with. We can tell it what about our entity, how many employees we have, what locales we operate in, therefore what regulatory requirements we might have, and try to really tailor the response that we're getting back from the AI to fit and really give us a solid foundation of risk data. Now, this is just the vendor profile entry, right? And so obviously we talked about all the benefits of gaining efficiency. I think we all understand that. And this is the first piece. But with some advancements in AI that have happened recently, it's really unlocked use cases that apply to the entire process.
So when we look at this overall process, what we're going to talk about now is taking it from the third party all the way around the wheel to the final report. Now, we won't go deep into each one of these today, but what you're going to see is that every step of the process, there's spots where AI can be utilized today, as well as you begin to imagine where this is going. The longer time frame that we have here and the further AI is developed, the deeper we can go with each one. So we've already demoed this initial one of just entering the name and third-party description. That's actually probably the easiest one of the bunch to do, so that's why we started there. I would say we're at our beta version right now. But where we're heading is the ability to start populating information around individual engagement. So if you're working with IBM, you probably have multiple different ways that you work with IBM. Different products, different services, whatever it might be, and each one will require their own review. As well as from there being able to tier those individual vendors regarding how important they are compared to your broader data set. You have thousands of vendors. Who are your most important ones? That's currently all done manually. But the big one that we're working on right now sits right here underneath assessment. And I think this is where we're going to see the most power coming forward. And what we're focused on is this idea around the SOC 2 and policies. What we're able to do now is take a SOC 2, drop it into the system, and automatically have the AI do the full review of the SOC 2 for us, pull out key controls, pull out bindings, populate that information for us. That's hours and hours and hours of work when you start considering the thousands of vendors that needs to go into it, that we can automate that entire process with it.
Yeah, to get a little bit deeper into the process that needs to happen for this to occur, think about the way that a SOC report is reviewed, right? The steps that you perform when you're reviewing a SOC report include things like looking at the period of coverage, looking at the scope and the system description to make sure that it covers the products and services that you care about, that you ask for the SOC to report on. When you create those engagements at that step back there, you're typically creating an engagement, right? We started with IBM, the vendor, and then underneath that, you're going to interact with IBM in many different ways. They offer many different products and services, and so you're probably going to create an engagement that's specific to a product or service for that scoping. Because then when you go down the line and you're doing your assessment, your risk assessment, it's going to be focused on those areas, those products and services that IBM provides. It's not coincidental that that's the way SOC reports, SOC 2 reports especially, are written, right? They focus on a service and then they decide what trust services criteria apply to that product or service. And when you're reviewing your SOC report, one of the steps is making sure, all right, does the scoping of this match? And does the period of attestation match what I'm looking for? Is it a qualified report? Like what is the What is the attestation conclusion from the third-party attestation entity? Are there any subservice organizations? Do I have to care about CSOCs, right? Subservice organization controls. What about the controls that we should be performing internally to support this SOC report, right? The CUECs. All these pieces are part of a proper SOC report review process. It's complicated for a human to do it. It's also a little complicated for an AI to do it, but with the power of GRC platforms, and they've always meant to gather risk data, hold risk data, and automate workflow. You can take existing risk data that you have on all of those areas. So you know who your vendor is. We just showed you how that happened, right? You know what the engagement is because you enter it in on the product or service that you're looking for. So by the time you get down to the assessment piece and you're getting ready to review the SOC report, you can provide the SOC report. It can be sent to the AI, and they have these things called private assistants, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then it can compare that to the known data about what vendor are we assessing the SOC report for, what is the engagement, so what are we looking for as far as what it should be covering, et cetera, et cetera.
I think a key thing we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, but is we're not just using ChatGPT or just like plugging information into there. These are models that are powered by OpenAI, but are private to that organization that allows us to give it more information and even train it on our information and provide our details to it. So this is no longer just a public model where we can say, write me a fancy email and it gives me back an email. These are specifically trained models to execute specific tasks inside third-party risk management to automate this process. Now, this can go beyond third-party risk management, obviously, begin to think about all the different applications where it can take you, but today we're focusing on probably the 30-some use cases just in third-party risk management alone to begin to automate some of these processes.
Yeah, and every time we demo this to a new organization, you can see light bulbs going off in folks' head. They're, oh, you could use it to do this. This process would really, really be helpful. And we said, yep, yes, we can. We're putting it on the line, on the list. But there are other areas, so we've gone in depth talking about how it can review a SOC report. Other really important use cases that fall in line on this one fall under the issue and remediation piece, which we can talk about. They fall under the assessment piece, the questionnaire.
So we'll stop here on issues of remediation. One thing we've done is like as you're evaluating the SOC 2 or you're doing any of the other review assessments, you may have those issues of remediation that we talked about. Another spot where it takes a lot of time to execute. When we combine AI with these workflow tools, the GRC tools, we're able to automate the creation of findings and even automate the recommendation of here's how we recommend you remediate those findings and then send that off to the vendor.
Yeah. Here are the risks in your risk register that this finding relates to.
We technically, probably in the next year to do this without any human intervention, that would carry significant risk as well. And I would encourage any organization to do that because you still want that human touch to review to making sure that we're covering the hallucinations, we're covering the biases, we're making sure that everything's accurate. But that capability just continues to grow regarding how much we can do with AI to automate this process, which is usually a big gap for most organizations being able to cover this full circle.
Yeah, I'll touch on one more use case.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool one, and it'll probably be the one that we work on after the SOC 2, and that is automated questionnaire completion. So organizations get fatigued because they're getting asked questions over and over again, right? Like this is the thing that SOC 2s were invented to try to prevent, is you're getting audited over and over again by different entities. But organizations still, they have their special sauce when it comes to their third-party risk assessment process, and they have to ask the questions that they want to ask. Of course, they'll probably take the SIG as a foundation of the cloud.
Some of these are like 500 questions long.
Yeah.
And I mean, customized for that organization what they want to ask, but typically they all consist of a lot of the same information.
And think about being an analyst who answers these questionnaires over and over again. I've had the pleasure of doing a few of them, and if I could help automate that, I definitely would take advantage of that. But so yeah, with AI, you can complete a SIG questionnaire, take your 3, most important clients questionnaires that you got from them last year, complete those, train your private model on the answers to those questions, and then inevitably when they send you the questionnaire next year, you've at least got the automated responses to go, and maybe there's a handful of new ones that they decided to throw on you that you have to put somebody to answer.
The AI will take a stab at it, but you should probably, again, always review everything that comes out of it. And the final piece that we're working on too is just the overall final report, bringing it all together into a single report. A really strong thing for an AI to take that first draft at. We always call it the blank page challenge. One thing that AI is really good at is filling in the blank page. And then from there, you can take it a step further to begin to review, update, and modify those. That's kind of that full life cycle from start to finish. Now, we've alluded to some of these considerations that AI is not without its challenges, without its concerns, and typically these are the four main objections we hear whenever it comes to actual utilization of AI in an organization. The first one is around AI hallucination. I think most people know this term now. It's still one of my favorites. And this is really that the AI, if you ask it a question, it will give you an answer. And whether that answer is right or wrong, may or may not, it can really range. And whenever it gives you a wrong answer, really they're calling it hallucination. It will make stuff up. It will make up organizations, it'll make up law firms, it'll make up cases that don't exist. There's been multiple examples of that. Hallucinations have been decreasing with newer and newer models that have been released. I'm seeing less of this, and now that there's starting to kind of root it out. But whenever we're putting one of these in place, we set targets around what's acceptable from a hallucination and accuracy perspective. We want it to be at least 90% at minimum from an accuracy rating. Otherwise, that use case shouldn't actually go into effect.
And I'll plug the big companies on this one, right? Like when we first started running these, we would see hallucination pop up time to time. Less and less we're seeing them. And I'd like to take credit for it, but really it's not by any of our work. It's because they're really getting better at dialing these things in. We've also noticed them saying more and more, if they don't have access to the information, they'll say, I don't know. I'm unable to help you with this. Why don't you look at that X, Y, and Z? The other thing that we've done to try to lower hallucination, and this, if I do plug anything that we've done, this would be it, is trying to expand the contextual prompting that we give when we send over a question. That helps dial it in, helps give it a little bit of an understanding about where we're coming from, and usually helps avoid hallucination responses.
And in bias, I think everyone's pretty familiar with the bias one. We oftentimes hear this coming out of HR, but there is an impact here in third-party risk. If you're using a solution to evaluate your third parties, if it's looking at your path vendors that you selected, there may be a bias towards specific vendors, specific vendor locations, or even makeup of the owners from ethnicity, economics, countries that they're coming from. So you do need to be aware that bias can creep into it, even if it's unintended, and it can show its face in different ways. The final one here, we've talked a little bit of accuracy reliability, is data privacy and security. This is kind of that big one that everyone's always concerned about. It's our data. We can't give it to another organization, and we can't have people putting it into ChatGPT because then it's gone, which is true. Don't take your organization's data, drop it into a public-facing ChatGPT. It's now ChatGPT's pretty much property to do and train their model on. But what ChatGPT has done, and OpenAI to be exact, these other ones, is that they're enabling organizations to have their own private models. So it's almost like a cloud-based. If you're going to use AWS, you don't own those servers, but you're putting your data out there. It's the same thing with OpenAI. If you're going to have your own organization's private model, you'd be paying for that. You now have your own model that you can train with your data. So you're much more expert in this space because you probably spend 20% of your time talking about this one.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of SOC reports, OpenAI in particular, Google, they make SOC reports available for review in these areas. So in the same way that you would put an application server out onto AWS for hosting, right? And then Amazon becomes your subservice organization. It's the same sort of situation, right? You're putting out, you're having a private hosted model, so to speak, instead of a private hosted server.
And the last piece is what we talked about is always accuracy and reliability. Every answer should be reviewed. AI can do things a lot faster, but it may not always do it more accurately. So whenever those responses come out, always have that human interaction around it to make sure you review and touch everything, which we've said multiple times. So
A couple more things on the data privacy and security. The second one, we did this presentation at a SOC, man, we got peppered on that one.
It's full of IT auditors for those not familiar with SOC. So they really leaned in hard.
So in our software, in our AI hub, we actually have built in, and this was prior to the advent of us being able to use these private hosted models, we built in a couple data security and privacy controls. Number one being a pattern matching recognition scrubber, so you could say, look, if anything comes through and it looks like it's a social security number, it looks like it's a credit card number, it looks like it's this type of account number, don't send it to the LLMs, right? So that's still in place. And the other one is just whitelisting and blacklisting, right? So this is our company name, never send it. These are our client names, never send these. So we still have those and we have that ability. It's just become, a lot safer since we're able to have these private hosted models that don't train other models, that are your data.
So I think where we're at the AI journey now is we've gotten over probably the initial hype. That was 2022, 2023. We're now entering the phase of application. And we're still probably very, very early on in how this is going to be applied. We keep exploring new ways of where we can utilize it, how it can be leveraged. We talked about a handful today, but I think what we're going to see is that we're still a long ways away from ever getting to perfection, but progression on this is significant, and it's changing how organizations work, how third-party risk management works, how just the general risk compliance function will be working in the future. I think globally this will have impacts that we don't really fully understand yet.
Broadly, the way that I try to think about this, and an analogy that I use, is that when the iPhone came out in 2007, I don't think people realized how often and how integral smartphones would be in our daily lives, right? I remember my first reaction to it was, cool, I now have a phone and my iPod in one. Oh, and it's got a calculator. Awesome. I didn't realize that I would be doing my banking basically every day on it. It would be telling me where I go, whether I'm walking or in a car. That I would be chatting with my children through video, like I did this morning through it. And how just about every part of our life is now integrated into it. I don't think we really understood it. It was like, oh, cool, touch screen and these functions, great. And I kind of think that's where we're at with this, right? There are many, many organizations working like we are to integrate this functionality, to integrate the power of AI into many different processes, many different products. And I think you're going to see those over the next course of the decade, of this decade and decades to follow. And we are now, taking it and saying, how can we make our work lives easier when we're working in our risk management tools? And I think hopefully you guys enjoyed the very first demo of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, David Martin is the second part of the presentation coming up with Santina. So thank you, Andrew and David. Do you need this?
Yes, I do.
Let me just switch to the next PowerPoint.
Perfect, thank you.
Figure out how to do this. That's why I got
You're setting that up. I wanted to say that, yes, I am also a little bit of a coffee snob. But I more am the coffee snob in that my Italian roots. I start the morning with my stovetop espresso maker, and so not completely with the topic that we were just talking about. And so I'm thrilled to be here, and especially David, thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm so proud to be a member of this group and to be a chartered accountant. I will say, was really inspired by the sessions earlier this morning, because I also have thought a lot about this. Where did I start my career? One of my proudest moments was passing my CA exams back in Canada. And never did I think, in terms of the trajectory of my career, that I would be standing here today. I have been a standard setter, I've been a regulator, I've been an auditor, leadership coach, and now here I find myself in front of this terrific group. What I will say, as a child, my favorite program was the Jetsons. I'm not sure how many people remember that. I always had that vision of being in that really fast car or plane going over the traffic when I lived in Toronto. But what I will say is that I did not know that I'd be here today speaking about AI.
And certainly, we are in a moment of history, is what I would say. Thomas Friedman, a terrific columnist for the New York Times, said, the idea that we're just not changing one thing. You have to change everything, and this is going to be about how we create, how we compete, how we collaborate, how we work, how we learn, and how we govern. So, fantastic, a lot of positives, a lot of great things that are coming, and certainly with the session we just went through, we heard a lot about that. But there's a flip side, of course. And the flip side is that by the very nature of those items, the flip side is that we can also accelerate and have the opportunity for cheating, crimes, etc. So we have both sides. But the great news, and so when you think about our profession, especially for auditors, but also for people that are preparers, but I'm going to focus today on the auditors and thinking about this a bit from the PCOB perspective and giving you an overview. So the auditors are the gatekeepers of the financial ecosystem, so it plays an important role, and we look here about the intersection points of everything that is happening and is all happening at the same time. With the company perspective, KPMG's reported that by 2027, nearly all companies will be actively using AI. So following on where you're saying we're moving into the application phase. So auditors are going to need to be following that and also being able to respond to that. In terms of legislation, where there's AI now is also involved in most legislation. The ICPA had reported that a lot of the bills that are before Congress in the states, here in the United States, more than half, they doubled from last year of how many mention AI now. So it is becoming integral in everything that we do. In terms of regulation, obviously there are different regulations that are going, that are being developed around AI, and it is certainly a focus. I want to focus here just about what is it that who are the overseers of the auditors. And the PCOB is the organization that oversees the audits, and they have a technology alliance group that they have spearheaded in order to inform them of what do they need to do in terms of standard setting, etc., as they are moving into as technology is advancing and developing. So I come back to the auditor as being the gatekeeper. And why I say that that is so important is where you see everything that is changing all at the same time, is that our capital markets function because of trust. And the auditors are really important in making sure that there is trust in that system. So the work that auditors are doing and going to be doing is going to evolve and change. I know that it's been a little bit of a buzzword. My colleagues, a number of my colleagues last week were at one of the AICPA conferences called AICPA Engage, and they said almost all the booths had AI in them. And it was a bit reminiscent, if you recall, of where we were when it was like the .com era, and that was very popular. But from an audit perspective, what kind of things are auditors going to be thinking about? This is another report that talked about what things should auditors prioritize. And auditors, so a rather long list when you look up here of all the different items auditors should be thinking about. But what I will focus on and what I highlighted was the first three deal with risk. And this is all about risk mitigation, internal controls. So all these developments that are occurring at companies are things that auditors are going to be developing their approach and process to address. And of course, about how they direct or look at fraud and how they detect it. The Center for Audit Quality that also produces and provides leadership thought for the profession has highlighted and just recently produced a report that talked about what are the things that auditors need to be thinking about as they are auditing AI, and this was focused on Gen AI. So really all the questions that auditors need to be considering. But I'm going to focus from that list on just 4 items here. Did I count right? See, I'm not an auditor. I've forgotten those skills. We are beyond the numbers because I can't count. I said 5. So when I think about governance, so here, auditors are going to need to, for sure, understand what's the governance over AI. So now I'm thinking about how an auditor is approaching an audit. They're going to want to understand what the controls are over that process, how the solutions are identified, how they're managed, and also, who is accountable, who is responsible for that oversight about these models and tools that are being developed. And that is going to be that very first step around looking at internal controls, especially when you're looking at internal controls over financial reporting. From a reliability and completeness and accuracy, of course, all of this information is based on data, right? Well, information is data. So when you think about there's going to be data going in, data being processed, and data coming out. And auditors, in many ways, the things we do is not, the principles and the process is not really changing, but it's the how is going to change, and those risks that are being introduced through this process. So where you have models that are learning and changing. So if you look at it and you're looking at it today and you get one answer, and as it learns, it gives you a different answer, over time, is that tool that a company is using, is it still giving them the appropriate information? Is it still working as it was designed or intended? So there are a lot of questions here that are going to be considerations that auditors will have as they are doing their work. And certainly thinking about bias, we talked about that before. And I was hearing about this, I hear about this in a number of different ways because it touches a lot on some of the topics around diversity, right? How do you build the tools is so they're based on prior norms and practices, but is that inserting a bias into it? So this, in terms of the information that's being used, and I think about like what an auditor would be looking at, they'll be looking at things about, is this overstating, understating, or what is the bias, and how do you evaluate it in terms of ensuring that, again, we're focused on, is it accurate, is it complete, and is it reliable? So I think in some ways, we still have that black box concern. So it's still about what happens in the middle, right? Like, how do we understand all the algorithms? And so these are challenges and opportunities that are present, that are going to be assisting, and I think it's a really exciting time, and a really exciting time for the audit profession. And I do think one of the topics that I'll talk a little bit later on is that I think it is also an opportunity to really engage with newer staff that are coming in terms of the exciting promises, and linking this back to the basic trust that auditors are really focused on about the capital markets. So when you think about, like, if you take this a step down to audit itself, where have some of these tools, where are they being used, and are they being used right now? I do think that some of this is still maybe like not as prevalent in practice just yet, but where we see it is in using things like for planning and being able to look at larger data sets to identify the risks that may be available, whereas most of this activity would have been very manually focused, and it probably still is. We're seeing some of these tools being used, but they are they're more, I would say, additive as opposed to replacing procedures. And being able to look at large volumes of data. And so again, where you're testing, an auditor's doing test work or doing substantive testing, they're now with some of the tools, they're able to look at complete populations of the information. And it helps to make it a lot more effective, as opposed to just picking a small group of information, of a small sample of a company's results. And I just, as data snipper, although my colleagues, I keep saying sniper and they keep correcting me, but that's been one of the popular tools that we've seen being used. And again, it really helps with being able to extract data and being able to look at consistencies amongst the information. Certainly, there is research as well that has come out to say that use of AI can actually help reduce the likelihood of a restatement. So again, some research that suggests enhancing some of these tools or incorporating the tools are going to assist with improving audit quality. And again, something that as the PCAW, as the, and I was a former audit regulator, worked at the PCAW, certainly something that they are obviously very focused on. A firm, just like a company though, is also looking at their own internal controls. And in an accounting firm, it's going to be the quality controls or quality management, depending on if you look at it from an international perspective or from a US perspective. This is an area where currently the PCAW has just recently introduced their standard that deals with this area. Is going to require significant change in the operations of the way the firms structure their quality. And of course, what is focused on here is that the goal is that a firm is performing audits that are going to provide reasonable assurance that their audits are compliant with the standards and that they're quality audits. So again, I link it back to the trust. That's the important element of what we do as auditors and accountants. So where's Gen AI helpful, and some of the areas where you can see in terms of how a firm looks at it, and linking back into the third-party risk. Firms are making decisions on how they accept or decide to continue with working with clients. So they are making decisions on who should they be associated with? Are they competent to be able to do the work? So a lot of decisions that go through, like understanding what are the risks involved. And so using these tools are helpful in being able to more quickly bring together all the questionnaires, all the risks that are in the environment so that they get a better understanding. It's also the first step where they're looking at risk, because risk underlies the audit. Auditors are identifying, assessing, and responding to risk. And this will be that first step in them identifying what are the risks that are involved. And certainly independence and conflicts of interest. This is something that, especially if you deal with multinational work, very complex, involves a lot of rules, regulations, and also requires being able to go out and check, like if the staff, if they have they reported all their investments and their family members. So there's a complex chain there, and AI has the huge potential here to be able to assist in being able to identify that information much more quickly and perhaps catch any of those conflicts of interest before they may happen. And of course, with scheduling, a great opportunity for the bringing together and optimizing how you match your the competencies of your staff with the competencies of the engagements that you're going to be working on. So certainly if these are, when I encapsulate, where are they? What are the benefits? Obviously, automating a lot of manual tasks. One thing from a documentation perspective, which is, sometimes I would say is the bane of our existence, but this is an area that, especially if you're subject to oversight from a regulator, they're going to want to be looking at your documentation. And this is something that I know in some of the work I do as a consultant at Johnson Global, and we're helping firms through this. And sometimes what you will see, we have volumes and volumes of information in our audit work, and it is easy for inconsistencies to arise in that documentation, and for someone to question, how did you reconcile these different pieces of information, and how did you address what the potential risks were from those different pieces of information? So a lot of opportunity there for the enhancement of the documentation. And of course, a few of the things that I had spoken about, I think one of the things that will be exciting is the being able to make predictions about future risks, so being able to better do an analysis of history. So you can think here, especially about characteristics around frauds, but being able to populate that and being able to use that in order to predict what might happen. But also from a firm, it's when you're subject to regulation, using AI just in terms of your own monitoring of engagements to be able to identify any issues real time, which right now is a very manual process. So as I said at the PCOB, they had initiated a Technology Innovation Alliance Working Group. This is a group that is advising them on where technology and the emerging technologies are going, and is there any impact on standards? What do they need to be thinking about? The group is chaired by Christina Ho, a board member from the PCOB. She's got a very strong background in IT as well, and so she's mentioned that they will be coming out with a report shortly on the results from what they have, all the outreach and work that they've been doing. I know our organization, one of my colleagues has participated in the working group as well. So just yesterday, and I hope you won't ask me too many questions about this new standard, but they proposed, they had an open meeting and they finalized the standard. It's still pending SEC approval because the SEC also needs to approve their standard. But this new standard was really dealing with it's a first step to start to incorporate technology into the standards. But it is really saying, here's what you need to think about when you are incorporating technology in the standards. For a lot of firms, I'm not sure it's going to make a substantive change, but it's the first step that is really moving towards clarifying and really focusing on some of the things I was talking about earlier about your controls. How do you know that technology works? What is your control over that technology? And how have you evaluated the reliability of the data that goes into the technology, that is going into however you are using it? So again, focused on the principles, we always are looking for reliability, the audit evidence, how do we know it to be true? So these same things are going to apply with regards to the technology. So, here I say that our core foundations of who we are as auditors, it's core to us that we're skeptical, we have judgment, and these are the things that are going to remain paramount for us. I think they're the valuable skills that are going to be even more important in focusing again on building that trust and the integrity in the market as AI that is just introducing this sort of a perpetual change we're dealing with. So I want I think a number of these things, we talked about, and I know earlier Andrew and David spoke about these, but I wanted to focus on the bottom two. Sort of that new skills for auditors and the human interaction piece of it. So this is on the flips. On one side, it's that opportunity for the growth of being able to build the skills and the knowledge in order to be able to apply these new technologies. Of course, there's the one concern with it. How do you, when we automate a bunch of stuff and we take out like that core, and our profession's been based on that apprenticeship model, how do you build the skills to have judgment, to be skeptical, and to continue to be able to apply those? You're going to need those in order to understand what should be the prompt. Did I put in the right prompt into the AI? Is the result I'm getting the right result? Does it make sense? How do I know that? So again, there's going to be, I think, a new opportunity and certainly a shift in how we train and develop people in order to have those critical thinking skills around building their judgment, their skepticism, and being able to get to that level without actually having the opportunity to get involved in the details of it. So an opportunity that presents itself, and also I think a great opportunity and an exciting opportunity for the new entrants into the profession that I think we could do a better job of marketing for us. And not, of course, the last bit about human interaction. If I put like my leadership coach hat on, this is the piece around how do we maintain the humanity in all that we do. And I do think that is a concern. And certainly we've seen it just even with some of the things that have occurred over the last few years. That being ability to have interaction, the ability to learn from others, to observe others. How are we going to be able to maintain that? But it will be the focus that we would want to have on those things to build the skills, just like that first panel of the trajectory and the weaving roads that we've all had. So we have to be bold and responsible all at the same time. So especially as auditors that are responsible for maintaining that trust in our system. And as we move forward, here's where I like to think is that, again, focusing on being experts, we are experts. One thing we're very good about is collaborating and continuing to do that. We've learned to be able to work together as teams, but it's also building that diversity and learning from other sectors and industries, and doing this in a very transparent environment, which seems almost like the opposite of saying there's a lot of algorithms and we don't really know what the algorithms are. But I do believe that combination of those three are the things that are going to be important and vital to continuing to build our judgment and our the trust that others will have in the work that we do. And asking the right questions. That's where I will leave us, with asking those right questions. It's going to be very important, and we have been trained and learned. That's what we do at the core of us, whether we're a preparer or whether we are an auditor as a chartered accountant. It is one of those things that you learned how to ask questions, what questions to ask. And I think there's an opportunity here to continue to do that and to continue to build and retain that skill. But that is going to be really important in this age that we are entering, that I think is a really, really exciting time. So with that, I'm happy as well to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now, we're running a little over, but that doesn't matter. We've got plenty of time. We'll rearrange the agenda throughout the day. We can always cut out the last speech.
Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a Q&A session. So any questions for Santina or Andrew? David had to leave to catch a flight. So.
Thanks for the insight for sharing. Just a quick question. I think what you shared is really, as an auditor myself, I hope to see it being rolled out. But I just want to ask, what's the time frame or the time horizon you think all these that you described would be rolled out in practice in full force?
That's a great question, and I might ask Andrew if he has a prediction. I think it's in, there's like two pieces to this. I think some of it is happening faster than we think. When I look at where companies are going, auditors are going to be having to catch up. I do think, or being at the same level. I don't have a good answer for you, but I do think it's going faster than we think. There are a lot of companies out there right now that are developing a lot of these AI tools to just address the different things that we've been talking about. You saw recently, I don't know if it was this past week where PwC made the announcement about their partnership and investment in AI. So I think it's going to happen probably faster than we think, but I don't have a really good prediction for you.
Alana, I think it's going to be iterative. I think you're going to see from here to 5 years from now, major change. But it's not going to happen necessarily all at once. It's going to be little by little, banks are starting to utilize AI more and more throughout the audit process. For example, at our firm, we've leveraged an enterprise license to OpenAI, probably not surprising based upon my speech. And my challenge to my team is there's an expense to this. It's not horrible, it's like $20 per person per month. That adds up when you have a big team. And so how can you use this 20 times a day to automate something in your work life? And what we've also enabled through that is our team can build their own models inside this. So we have individuals that have created some highly custom ones that we have a solution. We implement a lot of GRC solutions. So one someone's working on is we use one AI to automatically track when we're creating training guides. Say I clicked here, I clicked here, and it creates a base user guide. That got us about 70% of the way there. We then can take that, drop it into another AI tool that gets us 95% of the way there because it trains us the rest of the way there. We built that utilizing various AI solutions. Now that's not on any technology vendor's roadmap, but we can begin to enable that. All right, now what's that next one we want to go after? So little by little, we start eating away at a lot of these individual manual processes. And then as the technology of AI continues to advance, every new model that comes out, we can do a little bit more. And then as it gets ingrained in more tools, you're going to use it further. So again, I don't know if there's a clear hey, 5 years from now, we've hit that nirvana state, but 5 years from now will not look like it did today, or even 1 year, 2 years on from that. So,
yeah. And also just, it's like we don't know yet what other solutions or other things are going to be created out there. So it's been accelerating very, very quickly.
My question is more on kind of regulatory and standard side. So is there any thoughts around making the regulations and standards AI friendly? So, you have a curated service that your AI model or pipeline can actually access, and you're going to get accurate results from it. So probably regulations should be in a vector store, correctly chunked, and so it can be accessed, and then you can see if you've got compliance. Is there any moves on the parts of the regulators to actually start to embrace and make it AI friendly?
I guess if I think about AI friendly, what I will say is that if they I can speak just from a PCAW sort of standard setting, perspective. Certainly, there's been a call for this that is our firms believing that standards are holding back, and you never want to be where a standard is holding you back from innovation and creation of new tools, etc. So certainly they are looking to the experts to learn more about where things are going and how do standards need to is there a need for is the standard holding things back, or do they need to make an adjustment to the standards? I think this one they just introduced is the first step towards recognizing the technology, but what they will say is that technology isn't like the audit procedure, it is the tool you're using. So that's where I kind of go back a bit to the first principles around what is an auditor's goal, like when they're looking at data or you're looking at audit evidence. You want to know that it's reliable and it's relevant. I think that with AI, maybe what's going to be different is that where you used to have a piece of paper that you would be able to use, now you have a prompt and a query and a result. So what you're going to need to look at is you got to understand that model. You got to understand, who had oversight over it. What was the data? How do we know that data that went into that model was valid, reliable, and appropriate? And then did the model process it correctly so that the output came out? So I think there's movement there. It may not be as quick as maybe people would like to see, but there is certainly movement, and we'll see what the results come from that working group that they've been working on as well.
Your question, I want to make sure I understand it. Are you asking regulators? Will they standardize how they put out regulations, how laws are drafted, or are you more so focused on PCAOB type standards?
The question was that if I'm developing an AI model,
right.
I'm creating an AI model, and I'm, as part of that, part of the AI has the ability to reason.
Yep.
So if you're looking at compliance with regulation,
Gotcha.
you'll want to have that regulation in a vector store that the AI can actually access and use it as part of its context window to reason on a particular aspect of your audit to see, okay, yes, it is in compliance with the regulation. So, if you've got all the regulations in a paper store and unstructured Word document, it's up to you to ingest that. But I think that's what I mean about the regulatory bodies actually starting to say, oh, we've actually got to change the way we distribute the regulations to say, okay, if somebody does a query on whatever standard it is, it's going to return the correct answer and put that into the context of the model. That's kind of where I'm
That's what I thought. I'm not expecting regulators to do anything. And let me tell you why. Early on in my career, when I was a law clerk, all the way back in law school, ended up doing tons of what we call 50-state reviews, reviewing laws and regulations across all 50 states, federal, regarding any specific topic. Every state did it differently. One regulator did it differently. At least it was online, but it was a lot of work. The advantage of AI, it can handle unstructured data a lot better than we ever could from previous. Like, I need to put this all in an Excel spreadsheet. I need to then load it into a database. So it's up to me to structure that. AI can do a lot of that for us. So I just don't see regulators shifting on that. And what I'll say too is in that space, I'm seeing more vendors, more technology providers starting to utilize AI for that exact use case, at least from review and here's what's changing. The leap they haven't made yet is how do we apply that to our controls and our testing around that. I think within the next year, you're going to start seeing more of that. One of the use cases we're working on is we can have our list of controls as an auditor for any specific topic. And we can use the tool to go out there and ask, provide your evidence. That usually then requires an auditor to review that evidence. We can use AI to review that evidence. And we could also then potentially, to your point, tie that back to the specific regs, the policies, whatever it might be. I know I'm belaboring the point, but I'll say the one spot where what's interesting in this market is court cases are not as readily available. It's public, but you have to pay for it.
And so this is where you have specific industries like, or specific companies like a Westlaw or Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis. They have a leg up because they have all that data. They have all that databases. And so they have a really easy job of layering AI on top of that from an AI from an attorney's perspective. So there's always this, how accessible is the data? And those organizations are going to be in a better spot to leverage AI or to sell AI technology solutions.
Yeah, and I think as well, I know we as an organization also like are partnering with different organizations that are developing some of these tools. And it's just like what you were talking about, Andrew, because there's also the piece around how do you make sure your audit is meeting the quality controls and the standards, right? You're going to have a regulator that's going to come in. Certainly the PCAW has been reporting that audit deficiencies continue to go up, and they've been concerned about that. And you see some of these things like the nature of deficiencies change certainly over time. And I think that the quality of audits is way better than it used to be. So it's certainly huge improvements. However, when you have this happening, their AI has the benefit to be able to use that tool in order to be able to begin to look and say, you know, how do you build that into how you actually do your audit so that from an auditor perspective, how are they complying with the standard, right? How are they complying with these different standards in terms of documentation? Is it consistent? You're communicating with an audit committee? Have you communicated everything you're supposed to communicate to the audit committee? Some of these things are very manual processes that then lend themselves to, you know, human error. So you can have the benefit of the tool that can really help to begin to identify this. And I think there's different applications that are being developed exactly for that purpose to be able to address it. So if, you know, do I think a regulator is going to come out with that? Probably not, but I'm imagining they may end up in time using AI as part of what they do too. But you see a lot of this development in terms of the applications currently.
Excellent. So, any other questions? Else, I'm going to move to lunch. Oh, one question. So, time for one more question, Peter.
It's actually a part you know, I'm fascinated by, you know, I'm an engineer before I became an accountant, and AI is fascinating. But I also think that AI stands for augmented ignorance. I don't think it's very intelligent. In fact, I think it's dumb as hell. And I'm bothered by what I would describe as the hope that something good is going to come out of it. I don't think there's a hope in hell that anything is good is going to come out of it unless we're very, very careful about our totality of thinking. AI has got potential for bad that is so huge, and I just don't see guardrails around sorting it out, you know, making sure that it doesn't happen. I've got a lot more to say on this, but you know, for another time.
You're responsible.
Santina.
Being bold and responsible, right? And I agree with you. It's where I started, and that's where I think, as accountants and auditors, where the value of what we do as experts that is going to be important in this process is being able to contribute to putting in those guardrails, because obviously, like sort of saying is that there's a lot of opportunity, but with the flip side is exactly what you're saying. And the flip side, you also have the opportunity for, you know, cheating, etc. So it's getting to how do you know that you're dealing with facts, that you have the facts that they're objective.
I'd say, I think the topic you bring up is probably a 10-week conference in and of itself and discussion around it. So I'm not going to be able to answer it fully right now. I think there's very, very legitimate concerns that always need to be there. There's ethics considerations, there's going to be significant displacement, the world is changing with it. And I would say, I think there's a nice correlation here of AI can't be successful, shouldn't be successful without audit along the way. with ethics along the way, with compliance professionals along the way. Because we can go down paths that we shouldn't be going down. And some will. It will be used for notorious purposes. It already is. But how do we manage that? I don't think I have all the answers, but at the same point, it's out of the bag now. And I think it's moving forward, there's no stopping it. So how can we work with it? How can we leverage it? And how can we begin to guide it to be as good as possible?
Thank you. So, thank you very much, Santina. So let me tell you what we're going to do next, because this involves all of you, and it's for the next hour. Right? So the good news is you're all sitting at the table. And what we've got is lunch in the next room. But don't go yet. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the next room and bring lunch back into the tables in this room. But each table, except for one, which we need to redistribute, has a moderator. So at the back you've got Dr. Barbara Porker. And Barbara, I'm not sure this is your topic, but it's around sustainability, ESG reporting. Is it working? Are we moving too slowly? That's the lunchtime topic. So Barbara and Kelly will lead that discussion, and at the end of it, when we come back after lunch, we'll have a presentation up here of what the question was, what the response was, and then we'll discuss as a group. The second table is in the middle with David Freeman. I think, David, your topic was key differences between the chartered accountant and the US CPA. Amche, you have a topic which is AI is impacting the accounting profession. How do you see this affecting you now in 5 years' time? Ross, you're on this table. You have a topic, attractiveness of the profession, how to encourage more accounting students. You can change that if you wish. And then Shane, you have our home institutes. How well are they supporting their members overseas? Where could they improve? We have one table that doesn't have that, so what I would like is if people from this table could split up depending which question you liked, split to one of the other 5 tables, and what we can do is we can either break, get lunch, come back, discuss, or you can discuss, break for lunch, come back, discuss. It's up to you. Lunch is available in the other room, and as I say, we've got an hour and then we'll have a plenary session. So feel free in that hour, if you're done with talking, you can go and have a break. So, thank you. Too much, Troy. Thank you.